Oh, hello there. Yes, well, gotta love medical euphemisms for pain. Yes, just had laser eye surgery. That euphemism was clicks. You might feel a few clicks, and I was thinking, no, I think I'm going to hear some clicks, but what I'm feeling is probably going to be something else. And sure enough. Anyway, never mind, I'm sure the eye drops for the rest of my life will be fine. Anyway, oh, it's a truism, just generally, that there is a mix of people. Some people get more of an education than others, and those people that have things like a university education tends to see the world in a particular way. I guess it just goes with the level of their education generally. And anybody that's sort of vaguely familiar with probably about half the potential things that you could do at university is going to be familiar with more complex ideas in and around power. I'm not saying you need to have read Foucault, but you can get your head round the fact that power is kind of multifaceted. It isn't just a single block thing. Now that creates certain problems because people that haven't necessarily been educated to that level very often will try to persuade themselves that it's fine just to sort of be intuitive about things, which it is to a certain level. But then if you are of a particular political bent, it means you have to stop intuiting about things and basically pretend that other things exist. And I think we've seen a lot of that in the last 24 or so hours, which of course brings me neatly to Diane Abbott and perhaps inevitably being suspended by the Labour Party, because one of the things you can't have in the Labour Party is left-wingers, and she certainly is that. You may or may not like Diane Abbott. I have my own personal opinions about her. Whatever, yeah. But nevertheless, she was the first black female MP, and ever since then the British media haven't liked her. Not that the British media is racist, you understand, because nobody in Britain is racist. They're merely concerned citizens, and even when they will attack the police late at night and smash windows and do other things and congregate around buildings that they'd really like to set alight, they're only doing it because they're provoked by people, well, probably with degrees, and who've been bussed in by Antifa. Boo and hiss. But what Diane Abbott was saying, realistically, and I think it's really noticeable on social media that lots of people were picking up on this, was fundamentally true, okay? Your experience of life in the UK is very much dictated by whereabouts you are. And one of the key elements of that, apart from the usual things like class, is going to be racial stuff. So if you're a very dark-skinned person, if you're a bloke who's definitely from Somalia in terms of your racial characteristics, your perception of racism is probably going to be quite different from, I don't know, let's say the average owner of GB News. I don't think that anybody can really argue with that, but nevertheless they will do. And that very much brings us to the British media, because they do want to pretend that there is no such thing as racism whatsoever, whilst at the same time insisting that there are various groups of people who, due to their racial characteristics, are inherently bad. Now, I don't know about you, but I find that slightly contradictory. I don't see how you can have one without the other. When you lump all people in together due to their racial characteristics, that's basically a working definition of racism. And certainly various political commentators that we have, who, for example, will jump up and down about anti-Semitism, I'm not entirely convinced have actually experienced actual anti-Semitism in their lives. I sometimes ask young people I work with who will swear blind, white kids, that they've experienced racism. And when you ask them for a definitive view of that, they sometimes come up with something that happened about 5 years ago when a black kid at school they were in an argument with called them something rude, which pardon me if I don't realistically think that qualifies. And I get loads of people in my comments, for example, who will swear blind about the fact that the jobs market is loaded against white people. Ask them for proof, and inevitably they'll come up with a BBC internship from about 2 years ago, which, let's face it, they were never going to apply for anyway because they weren't just finishing a degree. There isn't anti-white racism in this country, and I don't care what anyone says, it's not a thing. But the convenient part about this is it means that we therefore don't have to talk about the actual racism there is in this country, which is being very, very nicely stirred up, particularly by certain voices in the media. And I'm wondering just what's going to happen when somebody actually dies, because they will do. Because this whole enterprise is, as I've said before, designed to push us towards certain right-wing parties who must come into power because we must do something about the boats. Okay then, let's do something about the boats. But I have a sneaking suspicion that all of the other things to do with those differences between people will be left very, very much alone. And let's magically assume that they get their own way and they remigrate. What a lovely euphemism. They remigrate everybody they don't like. Let's just imagine that that can possibly happen. What then? Because things won't get any better. They just won't. Because once you've got rid of, I don't know, Rupert Lowe's 2 million people, you're going to have a completely crashed economy. What do you want, people? You can live, if you want, in a world where there aren't any people different to you. But the problem with that is there will still be lots of people different to you. And they will sit in their very, very gilded and ivory towers, persuading you that a different group of people are the problem. It'll be the trans and the gays and the communists next. Of course it will, but that's okay because you're not trans or gay or communist or black, so it won't be a problem. But your material conditions will remain absolutely identical because the game isn't to make your life better, it's to make their life as comfortable as it can be. Sorry, but that's just bluntly true, isn't it? Anyway, do have a lovely weekend. Do enjoy the rain. Pitter patter. I think my cat's going to be a bit hacked off with having to be indoors. Do enjoy.